ask you, what connects your kitchen drawer, your car's seatbelt, and a massive 40,000 Newton elephant? I know, it sounds like the setup to a really strange joke, right? But the answer is actually the invisible architecture of our world. We're talking about forces. By the time we finish this explainer, you're going to see your regular morning routine in an entirely different light.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the push and the pull. Let's strip away all the complicated jargon and just start with the absolute basics of what a force actually is.
At its core, a force is remarkably simple. It's really just a push or a pull. That's it. Every single time something moves, speeds up, slows down, or changes direction, a force is that invisible hand responsible for making it happen. And we measure the size or the strength of these forces in units called newtons, named after the famous physicist Isaac Newton, of course. Oh, and it's absolutely crucial to remember that forces always have a direction. Pushing 10 newtons to the left is completely different from pushing 10 newtons to the right. And you don't need to look far to find them at work. Think about your morning, right? When you push your bedroom door open, you're applying a force. When you yank open the kitchen drawer to grab a spoon for your cereal, that's a force. Even right now, literally, right at this moment, if you're sitting in a chair watching this explainer, forces are hard at work. Gravity is pulling your body down toward the earth, and the normal force of the chair is pushing right back up against you. Forces are happening everywhere, all the time, basically running the whole shebang.
Section 2, Newton's laws in action. So we've conquered the kitchen. Now let's see how these famous rules absolutely govern our drive to work or a ride on public transit.
This brings us to Newton's first law, which is all about inertia. The rule is basically this: an object at rest stays at rest, and an object in motion stays in motion, unless a force acts on it. To visualize this, imagine you're standing on a moving bus. The bus is moving forward, and so are you. But suddenly, the driver slams on the brakes. The bus stops, but your body violently lurches forward. Why does that happen? Well, because your body wanted to just keep moving. No force had been applied to stop you yet. That stubborn resistance to changing motion, that is inertia.
And this concept becomes incredibly serious when we look at the stopped car versus the moving body. If a car gets into a crash, the vehicle itself stops almost instantly. But because of that inertia we just talked about, the human body inside the car continues to travel forward at the exact same speed the car was just going. Without some kind of intervention, that body is going to hit the dashboard or the windshield.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why we have seatbelts. The seatbelt's entire job is to be that external force. It catches you, applying the precise pull needed to overcome your body's inertia and safely stop you from moving forward. It's honestly just pure, simple physics saving lives every single day.
But what about Newton's second law? Well, that law tells us how mass, force, and acceleration are all linked together. Let's imagine you're at the supermarket. If you push an empty shopping trolley, it flies forward super easily with great acceleration. But if you fill that exact same trolley with, say, 50 kilograms of groceries, and then push it with the exact same amount of force, it barely moves. The acceleration is incredibly slow. Why? Because you have the same force, but way more mass. This is exactly why it takes so much more effort to push a really heavy object than a light one. Section 3, a world without friction. There is one specific force constantly fighting us. Let's do a wild thought experiment here. Imagine if every surface on Earth suddenly became perfectly smooth. I mean, zero friction anywhere. It sounds kind of fun for a second, right? Like a giant ice rink? But honestly, it would be pure chaos. If you tried to walk, your feet would instantly slide right out from under you. If you tried to pick up a coffee cup, it would slip right through your fingers. If you tried to drive to work, your car's tires would just spin endlessly in place and you'd go absolutely nowhere. Friction is the force that resists sliding motion, and while it might seem like a nuisance that slows us down, it's actually absolutely essential for our survival.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how friction shows up in our lives in so many different ways. First, we have static friction, which happens before an object even starts moving, like a parked car securely holding its place on a steep hill. Then there's kinetic friction, fighting against objects that are already sliding, which is exactly how the brakes on your bicycle slow you down. We also have rolling friction for things like car wheels gripping the road. And hey, let's not forget air resistance, which is really just friction from the air itself. It's the very thing that allows a parachute to catch the air and slow a skydiver's fall.
Section 4, the tug of war. So what happens when pushes, pulls, and frictions all fight each other? We have to look at what occurs when multiple forces act on a single object. You can actually think of practically every object in your house as being caught in a microscopic tug of war. When multiple forces act on an object,
We have to look at unbalanced forces. Just imagine a literal game of tug of war. Let's say Team A is pulling the rope to the left with 400 newtons of force, and Team B is pulling to the right with 600 newtons of force. Because they're pulling in opposite directions, we just subtract them to find the net force. So 600 minus 400 leaves us with exactly 200 newtons. But since Team B was pulling harder to the right, that 200 newtons of net force is directed entirely to the right. Team B wins. The rope accelerates in their direction. Now, if both teams pulled with exactly 400 newtons, the net force would be 0, the forces would be perfectly balanced, and literally, nobody would move an inch. Unbalanced forces are the root cause of all acceleration. Let's move to Section 5, the power of pressure, and see how this built. We know what force is now, but what actually happens when you concentrate that force? This is where we encounter pressure. Pressure tells you how concentrated a force is over a specific area. It's calculated super simply by taking the force and dividing it by the area. A really large force spread over a huge area creates low pressure. But take that exact same force and squeeze it down into a tiny, tiny point, you get incredibly high pressure. To really visualize this, let's bring back that question from the very beginning of our explainer. Let's compare an elephant to a person wearing a high heel. Now, the elephant is massive. It weighs roughly 40,000 newtons. A person in high heels weighs vastly less, only about 600 newtons. You'd naturally think the heavier elephant exerts way more pressure on the ground, right? But remember our formula? The elephant's 40,000 newtons are spread out across 4 large, flat feet. Meanwhile, the person's 600 newtons are concentrated all the way down onto the tiny, sharp tip of a single heel.
When we actually do the math, the pressure under the elephant's foot is about 100,000 pascals. That's the unit we use to measure pressure. But the pressure under that tiny little high heel? A staggering 6 million pascals. No way, right?
So the crucial point is that the tiny high heel is actually creating 60 times more pressure on the ground than the massive elephant's foot. That is exactly why someone walking in high heels will sink right into soft mud or grass, while a heavy 40,000 Newton elephant can just stroll across the exact same ground without sinking at all. It's not about the weight, it is all about the concentration of the force. Which brings us to the end of our everyday physics journey. But I want to leave you with one final thought. Newton's third law states that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. It's why when a rocket blasts gas downward, it shoots upward. Action and reaction. So as you sit there looking at your screen, knowing that action and reaction are always perfectly equal, I want you to ask yourself, what invisible forces are pushing back against you right now? Feel the floor pushing up against your shoes, the chair pushing against your back. You are constantly interacting with the universe, pushing on it, and it is endlessly pushing right back. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for those invisible forces hiding in plain sight.